Congratulations! You have purchased a truly remarkable overlocker or serger, the MyLock. With exclusive power surge, the MyLock trims, seams and overcasts in one easy step, cutting your sewing time in half and giving all your garments a professional finish. This video will show you how to use your MyLock and all the latest overlocking techniques which make fashion and craft sewing easy.
There are 3 machines in the New Home MyLock range. The MyLock 203, which has a single needle and 3 threads. The MyLock 234, which has 2 needles and 4 threads and can convert to a single needle 3-thread overlock machine. And finally, the MyLock 234D, which has the same features as the MyLock 234, but with the added benefit of differential feed. Owners of Model 234D should follow the instructions for Model 234 during this video. The special use of the differential feed will be explained separately later in the video.
Switch the MyLock on by pressing the power switch located on the right-hand side of the machine. The light will illuminate. To thread the MyLock 203 and 234, place good quality sewing thread onto the spool pins. If you are using smaller reels, place the spool holders on top of the cotton reel. This allows the thread to wind off evenly. Remove the front accessory tray and dust catcher. Slide the front access door to the right and pull it open. Extend the thread guide bar to its highest position. Following the green threading diagram number 1, insert the thread through the right-hand hole in the thread guide bar. Now, by folding over the end of the thread and twisting, it will become firm and easy to control. Using the tweezers supplied, insert the thread down through the rear hole, then back down through the front hole. Hook the thread through the next green thread guide and place it in the slot around the tension assembly and over the hook on the left-hand side. If you feel the tension is loose, hold the thread at both ends and tug gently, ensuring the thread is correctly inserted between the tension discs. Hook the thread into the next green thread guide, then to the lower guide on the looper arm. Pull open the side access door and pass the thread through to the left-hand side of the machine. Turn the balance wheel towards you until the needle is in its lowest position. Holding the thread from both ends, hook the thread into the looper thread guide. This thread guide is not found on the MyLock Model 234. Now, push the thread through the rear eye on the looper. Turn the balance wheel towards you until the needle is in its highest position, and pass the thread across to the right-hand side. Pass it through the looper eye to the rear of the machine. To thread the right-hand looper, follow the blue thread guide. Put the thread through the center of the thread guide bar and down through the rear center hole, then back down the front hole. Hook it into the blue thread guide, then down and around the tension disc slot, ensuring there is tension on the thread. Place the thread over the tension assembly hook and down to the next blue thread guide. Hook the thread through the looper thread guide and around the looper thread hook. Turn the balance wheel towards you until the needle is in its lowest position. Hook the thread behind the looper thread wire, then thread it through the looper eye and to the rear of the machine. To thread the needle on the MyLock 203, follow the red thread diagram number 3. Turn the balance wheel towards you until the needle is in its highest position. Place the thread through the left-hand hole of the thread guide bar and down through the rear left-hand hole. Then back down through the front hole. Place the thread around the tension disc slot, place the thread across the take-up lever mouth and down through the next red thread guide, around the needle bar wire and through the eye of the needle. Place all the threads under the pressure foot. To thread the needles on the Mylock 234, follow the orange threading diagram number 3. Turn the balance wheel towards you until the needles are in their highest position. Place the thread through the upper thread guide, down through the rear hole of the thread bar, and back down through the front thread guide. Place the thread around the tension disc slot and ensure that the tension is applied. Slot the thread into the lower guide, across the take-up lever mouth and down through the orange guide, around the needle bar wire and through the eye of the right-hand needle. To thread the left-hand needle, follow the red thread diagram number 4. Place the thread through the upper thread guide, down through the rear left-hand hole of the thread bar and down through the front hole. Place the thread around the tension disc slot, place the thread across the take-up lever mouth, then down through the red thread guide, around the needle bar wire and through the eye of the left-hand needle. Place all threads under the pressure foot. A seam line is where the needle enters the fabric, not where the blade cuts the excess away. To sew a seam, lift the pressure foot up, place the fabric under the pressure foot with the seam in line with the needle, lower the pressure foot and sew. When you get to the end of a seam, keep the foot control depressed and continue sewing, pulling the fabric out to the rear of the overlocker. This is called chaining off. Cut the thread on the thread cutter located on the left-hand side of the overlocker. On some fabrics, loose loops at the beginning and end of a seam can unravel. To backstitch at the beginning of a seam, ensure that there is about 5 centimeters of chain behind the needle. Place the fabric under the pressure foot and sew for a few stitches and stop. Lift the pressure foot and place the thread chain over the seam line and continue sewing over the thread chain and cutting off the excess. To secure the end of a seam, stitch along till the end of the fabric is in line with the chain finger. Lift the pressure foot and turn your work over towards you without pulling on the threads. Place the fabric back under the pressure foot, then sew back along the seam for a few centimeters. Run the stitching off the edge of the fabric and cut the excess thread away. Thread the excess chain through a large needle and thread the chain back through the last 2 centimeters of stitching. Then cut the excess thread away, giving you a neat, secure seam. To alter the stitch length, open the left-hand access door. Turn the balance wheel until the stitch length numbers are at the top of the dial. Hold the balance wheel and turn the stitch length dial to the desired length. A shorter stitch length gives a very strong seam and stops puckering on fine fabrics. A longer stitch length will give a less bulky seam and is suitable for use on heavier fabrics. To sew around a corner, make a 7mm cut into the corner of the fabric. Sew along with the needle stitching on the seam line. Before you get to the corner, stop with the needle in the fabric. Pull the fabric so the seam line becomes straight and continue sewing. When finished, the pleat will disappear and the fabric will return to its original shape. Ribbing is found on most garments, such as wind cheaters, t-shirts, tracksuits, etc. When applied, ribbing should slightly hug the body. For most garments, ribbing should be cut 1/3 smaller than the garment it is being attached to. Stitch the ribbing together by sewing the join. Then divide the ribbing into quarters and pin it to the garment. Because we are sewing in a circular manner, cut a small square of material from the garment as a starting point. Place the cut up against the blade and sew around the seam, gently stretching the ribbing at the same time. Be sure to remove the pins before they reach the knife blades. When attaching elastic, quarter the elastic to match the quarter marks on your garment. Pin the elastic to the outside of the garment so that the fabric extends about 5 millimeters past the elastic. Using a stitch length of 4, place the fabric under the pressure foot and sew over the elastic, stretching it at the same time. Keep the elastic up against the blade, being careful not to cut it. Stop with the needle down in the work. Stretch the elastic in the next quarter and continue sewing until the elastic is secured. Turn the elastic up and press the seam allowance down towards the garment. Narrow elastic can be used on swimwear, sportswear and lingerie. When stitching on narrow elastic of 5 to 7 millimeters, overlock over the elastic, stretching the elastic at the same time. Fold the elastic in towards the garment. With a sewing machine, straight stitch along the inside edge of the elastic, giving you a secure seam that will stretch and not roll. To blind hem on the mylock, hold the fabric with the wrong side facing you. Fold the excess down, away from you, then fold the raw edge up, so that it extends about 7 millimeters past the fold. Place the fabric under the pressure foot, so that the needle just pierces the edge of the fold. To blind hem on the mylock 234, place the fabric fold under the pressure foot so it is in line with the left-hand needle. When unfolded, the stitching should just show through to the right side of the fabric. A mock blind hem can be used to hem singlets, wind cheaters and most knit fabrics. Fold the fabric the same as you would for a blind hem. Place the fold of the fabric under the pressure foot so that it is in line with the cutting blade. Sew along and trim the edge of the fold. Open the seam out flat and your hem is finished. Lace is easily sewn onto lingerie and all types of ladies' wear. To sew on lace, cut the lace to the same length as the fabric. Set the stitch length dial to 3 and with right sides together, place the fabric and the lace under the pressure foot. Lower the pressure foot and sew, trimming away the raw edges. Press the seam allowance towards the garment. An exposed seam joins 2 pieces of fabric together and leaves the overlocking stitch as a decorative feature on the outside of the garment. Exposed seams are quick and easy to sew and are very attractive when used on leisure wear, knit fabrics and lightweight woven fabrics. To sew an exposed seam, use the normal stitch length. With the fabric wrong sides together, place them under the pressure foot and sew, trimming off the seam allowance. Exposed seams can be decorated by replacing threads number 1 and 2 with a heavy cord or a contrasting colour. Cut threads number 1 and 2 as close to the spools as possible. Replace the original spools with the new threads and knot the two ends together and cut away the excess threads as close to the knots as possible. With the pressure foot down, sew slowly until the new threads appear from under the pressure foot. After changing threads, hold the threads on either side of the appropriate tension discs and ensure the thread is between the discs by giving the thread a slight tug. Then sew your exposed seams, which now have a highlighted thread. Metallic thread and various yarns can also be used. On the Mylock Model 203, there are 3 different widths of overlocking available. Needle plate S, which is already on the machine, gives you a standard width stitch. Needle plate W gives you a wide stitch, and needle plate N is used for narrow hemming. To change plates, turn the flywheel towards you until the needle is in its highest position. Lift the pressure foot and, using the screwdriver provided, remove the front screw from the needle plate. For a wider stitch, attach needle plate W and secure it in place with the needle plate screw. This wider overlock is ideal where a strong seam is required, on loose knit or coarse woven fabrics. It is also ideal for sewing hand-knitted garments together. The narrow hem plate, plate N, gives a neat finish on light and medium weight fabrics. It can be used on ruffles, tablecloths, or anywhere a light, narrow finish is required. The Mylock 234 can be used as either a 4 or 3 thread serger. To sew a wide 3-thread stitch, loosen the needle clamp screw and remove the right-hand needle and thread. To sew a standard 3-thread stitch, loosen the needle clamp screw and remove the left-hand needle and thread. To sew a narrow roll hem, change the needle plate to narrow hem plate N. You must ensure that only the right-hand needle is used for narrow hemming. To set a narrow edge, adjust the stitch length dial to 1.5, the R symbol. Place the edge to be sewn under the pressure foot and sew. For a closer or satin stitch, adjust the stitch length dial towards 1. For an open stitch, adjust the stitch length towards 2. To decorate your garment, the use of contrasting threads, metallic threads, and variegated threads all give your narrow hem an attractive finish. Narrow hems can also be used to seam and neaten sheer fabrics, lace and lycra. A lettuce edge can be used on children's garments, belts and sportswear. A lettuce leaf edge is achieved by narrow hemming a single layer of fabric and stretching it at the same time. Woven fabric should be cut on the cross so that it will stretch as you sew. By using decorative thread on the loopers, threads number 1 and 2, the lettuce edge finish is enhanced. Pin tucks are used as a decorative finish on all types of fabrics. They can be used on the front of a blouse or bodice of a dress. To sew a pin tuck, using the narrow plate, stitch along the fold of the fabric, keeping the fold in line with the chaining finger. Be careful not to cut the folded edge. Sew as many rows of pin tucking as you require, using the width of the pressure foot as a guide. If you have purchased the Mylock 234D, you will find the threading is the same as for model 234. To change the stitch length on your 234D, simply turn the stitch length dial, located on the top right-hand side of the machine, to the desired length. Your Mylock 234D is equipped with a differential feed mechanism designed to overcome normal overlocking problems. Lightweight fabrics have a tendency to contract, and knitted fabrics have a tendency to stretch along their sewn edges, causing seams to pucker or wave. When sewing a lightweight fabric, set your differential feed dial between 0.7 and 1.0. The front feed dogs will move less fabric under the pressure foot than the rear feed dog lets out, creating a stretching effect which eliminates puckering. To sew a seam on a knitted fabric, set the differential feed between 1.0 and 2.0. The machine then feeds in more fabric than it lets out. This has an easing effect and will give you a straight, smooth finish. Gathering on your ML234D is as simple as setting the differential feed dial between 1.0 and 2.0, depending on the fabric and the amount of gathering desired. This is effective when sewing curtains, ruffles, and in many designer garments. Skirts and dresses can be gathered in the same way. A real time saver. Flatlock seams are used in the construction of windcheaters, tops and craft work. By flatlocking remnants of cloth together at random, you can construct your own personalised fabric. When sewing any of the flatlock seams, a more ornate finish is achieved by threading the right-hand looper, thread number 2, with a heavy or decorative cotton. To sew a lapped flatlock seam, adjust the needle tension thread number 3 to 0, left-hand looper thread number 1 to 6. For Mylock model 234, use a standard 3-thread stitch by removing the left-hand needle and thread. For loops on the outside of the garment, place the 2 pieces of fabric wrong sides together under the pressure foot. Sew along, trimming off the seam allowance. When completed, gently pull the 2 pieces of fabric until the seam lies flat. To lap join fabric with the ladder side out, sew with the right sides together. Again, carefully pull the seam open flat, with the needle thread showing on the outside. Flat joining is another method of joining 2 pieces of fabric together. Rather than joining 2 raw edges, as with lapped flatlock, flat joining joins 2 folded edges together. To flat join, use the same tension as the lapped flatlock. Disengage the cutting blade by opening both access doors. Push the blade handle in and turn it towards you until the blade locks in its lowest position. Close the access doors. On both pieces of fabric, press the seam allowance to the wrong side. Place the folded edges together under the pressure foot, in line with the blade guard. Gently pull the 2 pieces of fabric apart until they open out flat. To flat join squares or rectangles, flat lock all the seams in one direction. Cut the thread chains. Complete the patchwork by flat locking the remaining rows in the opposite direction. Various threads can be used to highlight the fabrics in the patchwork. After flat joining, return the blade to its original position, by pushing the blade handle in and turning it away from you until it locks into place. Flatlock hemming can be used to decoratively hem skirts, dresses or t-shirts. With the machine set for flatlocking, fold the hem allowance over twice to the wrong side of the fabric. Sew along the fold. When completed, gently pull down the fabric until the hem lies flat. A plain overlock can be used to decorate any garment or as an attractive finish on craft work. Use a standard or wide stitch. Overlock the edge of the fabric by using various decorative threads. Attaching ribbon and lace to fabric can be completed in one step when using a flatlock stitch. Lower cutting blade. Set overlocker tensions as for a flatlock, that is, tension on thread number 3 to 0, and left-hand looper thread number 1 on 6. Place the edge of fabric on top of the lace. Lay a narrow ribbon on top of the fabric and place under the pressure foot with the ribbon to the right-hand side of the needle and stitch. Gently pull the lace edge down until the ribbon and lace lie flat. To create a braid for trimmings on craftwork or garments, select the widest stitch possible, needle plate W. For Mylock model 234, select the wide stitch by removing the right-hand needle and thread. Using a narrow tape or ribbon, sew over the top so it is encased by the stitching. Use a heavy or decorative thread for a more effective finish. With your fabric cut into blocks or strips and right sides together, sew continuously without cutting the chain. Now, stitch across in the opposite direction to join all the rows. Quick and easy patchwork. Draw a thread from the grain of the fabric about 3 to 7 centimetres away from the raw edge. Use a standard 3-thread stitch. For Mylock model 234, use a standard 3-thread stitch by removing the left-hand needle and thread. Now, set the overlocker for flatlock. Needle tension thread number 3 to 0 and left-hand looper thread number 1 tension to 6. Fold the fabric on the line and flatlock over the edge, being careful not to cut the fold. When completed, remove the remaining threads by hand, giving you your fringe. The Mylock uses a standard sewing machine needle. The needle size 12 is used for most medium weight fabrics. However, there is a range of needles available to suit all types of fabrics. Since the needle greatly affects stitch quality, we recommend changing the needle after each completed project. To change the sewing needle, use the screwdriver to loosen the needle clamp screw and pull the needle down and out. Insert the new needle, flat side to the back, and push it up to its highest position. Then tighten the needle clamp screw. It is very important to maintain sharp knife blades. When you use basting pins, be sure these pins are removed from your fabric before they come in contact with the blades. Regular maintenance will ensure that your Mylock runs trouble-free. Clean around the knives and looper with a lint brush after every project. A great amount of lint collects in this area because of the cutting action of the machine. Oil your machine regularly to keep it running smoothly. Oiling points are illustrated in your instruction book. Happy sewing from the makers of Mylock.